Thank you for joining this session, How to Win Members and Keep Them Too. This session discusses the findings of Explore Gym's brand new upcoming research, which is going to be published in the autumn, which analyses over a decade's worth of new joiner data, so sales membership data, in the UK and Ireland. It analyses trends and identifies opportunities for gym operators like yourselves to maximise member acquisition in 2025 and ahead. The research also weaves in consumer insights from the UK Active consumer research that Georgie will talk to, as well as the ActiveNet consumer panel data as well. So you get that behaviour, motivation, sort of emotive data, as well as the actual membership sales stats. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. So Dave, did you want to go?
Good morning, everyone. My name's Dave Olstead. I'm the Commercial Director at Explore Gym.
Morning, I'm Georgie Paul from UK Active, Head of Events, Marketing and Engagement.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Allen, Business Development Director at Active Insight.
Thank you. Right, so moving on, just hope this works. It doesn't work. It's a good start. Okay, there you go. I'll use this. Okay, so bear with me. So the first slide is focusing on Gen Z being the biggest opportunity and the biggest risk. So if you look across the decade, you'll see that millennials peaked around 2016 and 2017 in terms of new joiners. And that's now in decline. We anticipate this continuing in the same way that it did with Gen X. You can also see that Gen Z are coming of age and started turning 18 in 2015. By 2030, all the Gen Z will be 18 plus. And Les Mills research highlighted that they are the biggest generation ever. So Dave, I'll come to you first. It's clear that Gen Z will be the biggest opportunity and are currently the biggest opportunity in terms of generation. When it comes to attracting Gen Z for gym owners and operators, we know that 73% of Gen Zers buy and advocate for brands based on their beliefs and values. So essentially, if a club can appeal to their motivations and build a brand that they feel connected to, they'll be positioned to win and retain more Gen Z members. So, for instance, we know that from Les Mills data that Gen Z are attracted to strength training and Group X. So what advice would you give to owners and operators to maximise the Gen Z opportunity?
From my perspective, I think if we look at Gen Z, as you said, they align with brands that kind of resonate with them from the social value perspective and from what they truly believe in. So firstly, it's around being authentic with your brand, what you're about, kind of being overt with kind of that messaging that goes out there. I think also the birth of Gen Z also coincided with the launch of social media, so clearly that plays a big part in attracting them, so having a strong social media presence. In terms of activity, and I know you cited the Les Mills research, which is really valuable, and I think what Les Mills do is fantastic. In terms of gym layout, gym kind of operating, and I see Alex in the audience from Club Kingswood, you guys do this really, really well. It's around creating spaces within spaces. So group exercise no longer just happens in a studio, right? You've got to create spaces that will appeal to that type of activity that they can align with. And what that gives is a real opportunity to create a diverse offering within a facility, and I think that's really important. I think we said this in one of the recent panels at Elevate, like we no longer as an industry can provide access to equipment, right? It's got to be about the experience because that's kind of what they value. And I know the guys at Technogym have a concept which again I really align with is the Club 4.0. So having spaces within spaces that you can really appeal to and attract that particular generation so they can participate in group style activities and as you said, the strength activities. There's one that's missed on that one, which is kind of been a growing trend across all generations, but is the focus on wellness as well, I think is really, really important. So to create wellness spaces within facilities.
And that was my next question, actually coming to Georgie. What are you seeing from your consumer research in terms of the behaviour motivations, the emotive motivations for this generation?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we, just as a bit of background, some of you may have or heard this morning, but the consumer engagement work is based over 18 months of quarterly polling. So we've got around about 10 to 12,000 data points that we're kind of referring to here. But the motivations, they are transposed across all generations, which is really, really interesting. But at the top is to improve and maintain physical appearance. And coming in number 2, which I think is super important to your point, Dave, is around mental well-being, so that holistic point of view. Number 3 is to improve physical appearance. And then number 4 for overall confidence, and for number 5 to improve sleep. So I think there's some really interesting kind of top things there that I think as operators we can really try and kind of harness and to understand what those motivations are for people to remain, but also then to encourage new people into our facilities.
Brilliant. Julie, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
Yes. Yeah, just a couple of points actually. So, Dave, you were talking about social media, and absolutely. So, we have access to 62,000 respondents through our consumer insight panel, and we go out frequently and looking at acquisition and retention and what really matters to members. And again, this goes across all generations, is club atmosphere. And we can really leverage social media to communicate that, to make sure our brand values are being communicated through social media, but obviously living and breathing it when you're actually in the club itself. And just from Georgie's point there around the different motivations, improving physical health, mental well-being, which includes depression and anxiety. But the 2 for me that really stand out, and I think as operators we need to be measuring this, is improving sleep, improving confidence. We're working at the moment on a platform to help operators actually manage and measure this. So have you noticed since joining NR Fitness, where's the NR crew? They're in here somewhere. There we are. Have you noticed since joining us your sleep has improved? Have you noticed since joining us you're feeling more motivated? So to actually start to measure that is going to be crucial to see an improvement on that national scale.
Thanks, Julie. Dave, I'll come back to you. So for Gen Z, September is the biggest time for new joiners, and October is the second biggest month as well for Gen Z new joiners, which aligns with the academic year. We know that Gen Z are true digital natives. So what can operators do to maximise that opportunity around September, October? Well, actually throughout the year for Gen Z.
Similar to the last session, really, the last question, I should say. I think it's about diverse and dynamic offerings. I think it's the why now generation. It's they want things real time. So that could be within the activities within the facility, as I mentioned before, but it could also be with a membership model. I think just to sell a membership is no longer going to appeal to everybody. I think to have different types of memberships for the different types of consumer or user is really important. I think what we haven't said about this generation yet is they want and expect personalisation. So having a communication pathway that speaks to this generation specifically, and I think bringing back to Julie's last point around kind of measuring the why that affects the emotions. We know that's why they join as well, because they want to achieve that. So from a longevity perspective, which I know we're going to come on to in a little while, I think hooking back to the emotive reason why they joined within your personalised communication is really, really important, and that will absolutely support retention. And I mean, I'm going to say this, but leverage technology. I think it's really important. We've got the technology that can really help you deliver this with very little heavy lifting at all, and I think to use that technology that you have to create that personalised journey is going to be what they expect. Absolutely.
Yeah, Julie, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, and I know we're going to explore cancellations further in the session, so I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but to your point there, Dave, around the emotion, we work with operators around designing the point of cancellation, essentially, but hooking, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but taking, hook you back on, take you back to the emotion as to why you joined in the first place. And we're seeing some really fantastic results where through an effective conversation of actually understanding, well, actually you came through our doors because you wanted to run around with your kids. Delivered a focus group the other week and met this wonderful chap, Jeff, who said, do you know what, Jules, I can now bend down and do my trainers up, you know, and really take them back. And we're actually seeing that people are like, why do I want to leave this? Actually, I do want to stay because these emotions are still real to me. So I think it's a really key point that you've raised there, Dave.
Thanks, Julie.
Joe,
Actually, my next question is for you as well. Sorry, Georgie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, sorry, no.
Go on.
It was just I guess, as a wider bit of context from the consumer engagement stuff around use of digital classes and stuff like that and facilities. In terms of actually choosing a facility, it came a location, quality of facility, and cost, you know, obviously. But they came out as some of the top 3 factors, and actually access to online content was one of the lower factors. However, I think what we're demonstrating and talking about here is actually utilising the platforms to encourage people into our spaces, and that's the key thing. Not just necessarily saying, oh, well, there's an online platform that you can join. It's actually being in the facility and experiencing the facility over and above some of the other stuff that we've just mentioned there.
And that does lead on nicely, actually, to the quite remarkable stats around Gen Z being the biggest opportunity, but also the biggest risk, with 15% of them cancelling within 90 days. 44% of those are silent cancellations due to payment failure or just completely just ghosting. How can clubs work to mitigate that, Julie?
Yeah, I mean, I found that quite alarming, to be honest. I mean, we know there's a large number of people that join and don't necessarily come back. So this, for me, and if you've heard me speak on this before, it always comes back to onboarding our new members effectively, designing experiences that are meaningful. You know, we're talking about leveraging technology, and there'll always be a space for that, but people are coming through our doors because they want connectivity, they want an experience. Again, I know we're going to spend a bit more time on this later, but in terms of my key takeaways here, it would be design, deliver experiences that meet that member where they are. We're understanding the motivations. We need our teams to be able to hold effective conversations and understand those real reasons for coming through. We need to have multiple journeys. You know, today we're probably going to focus primarily on health and fitness, but for those operators that offer swim-only memberships, Group X, PT, are their journeys designed to support those members through those journeys? Feedback quite often gets a bit of a bad name. It's like, oh, customer feedback. But creating an environment of trust where you build that rapport, where people feel comfortable enough to come up and say, do you know what, I was expecting this, but it's just not working out for me, is really, really powerful. And if people don't feel comfortable to have that conversation with you, to have those channels to open up that conversation, whether it is through some platform, there are various ways in which you can do it, chat to us after, but that is absolutely essential because it isn't feedback, this is your business intelligence. I have a lot of conversations with operators around, well, how are we going to grow, how do we grow? Well, are we looking actually at the real experience that you're delivering at the moment? So that's going to be absolutely crucial to minimise those silent cancellations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julie. Does anyone else have anything else to add to that before we move on to the next slide?
Just I think from the data is really important, because if it's silent, if you've got no data on it, you can't do anything with that. You don't know why people are leaving, and I think to create a culture and an environment where feedback is easy to give and actioned on is going to give you that data to be able to change your services moving forward. We need to get away from people not. We make it as an industry, and I'm going to say something quite controversial now. We make it as an industry very difficult for people to leave our facilities. So there's no surprise that they do it via a different route, whether it's cancelling at the bank or whatever it might be, and that leaves us in a black hole of we don't know really why they've left. So I think making it easy for people to cancel will allow you to ultimately to grow in the long term.
Quite a polarising topic, that one. We do go into more detail on the next slide on that one. So, but no, thank you, Dave. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, creating diverse spaces. We've noticed that over the decade, there's been an increase in gender not shared, which I think is most prevalent amongst millennial and Gen Z, which I think is reflective of our society today. We've also seen that more women now make up a bigger proportion of new members, with a decrease in men most prevalent to millennials and Gen X. So Georgie, I'm going to come to you. So traditionally, gyms have attracted more men than women, and we're starting to see that shift now over the course of the last few years. And I think that's thanks to changing attitudes of, the hard work that Sport England and UK Active works, with campaigns like This Girl Can. Does this align with what you're seeing? And I think the question for me is, how can operators make sure that they are creating inclusive spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's be honest, it's an awesome stat that we can talk about that, and actually that is kind of really seen some development over the past few years, and I think absolutely the work that This Girl Can and the campaigns around that has been amazing. So I think pat on everyone's back for that, because I think it's been a real shift in our sector. But yeah, absolutely. I think what we've done with that This Girl Can work most recently, and what we're trying to do with the consumer engagement work, is really understand where those trends are heading and what those particular areas and or demographic groups are, so that we can then actually influence change in those very specific areas, because we know that not one size fits all. So most specifically with the This Girl Can element of work that's done recently, we've launched the project Safer Spaces to Move. Now, although it is very targeted at women and girls, there's actually an argument that is just generally creating a safer space for individuals to, and we've seen some real motivations around kind of mental well-being, for example. So for those individuals to have a bit of me time to ensure that what they are kind of doing in that space, they feel very comfortable in. So actually being able to utilize the data to then process that into something that we know will actually enable people to do something with a tangible outcome, which will then influence change, I think is absolutely the key thing there. So as I said, the Safer Spaces to Move work is a wonderful example of that. And most recently, there's been a pilot scheme launch around Ask for Angela, which some of you may be familiar with in a hospitality setting. And we're going to utilize the evaluation off the back of that to really understand what has worked in that environment to encourage people to feel more comfortable. And as I said, and as you mentioned, it's very much around women and girls, but also it is goes across all kind of genders and people feeling more comfortable.
Dave, Julie, go on.
Sorry, no. I was just going to add, actually, in terms of the gender split. So to support the research that Explore have conducted, we went out to our consumer insight panel. We asked the question, how do you feel about joining a membership, joining a gym for the first time? And we saw a noticeable gender split there around words being used such as intimidating, daunting, nervous, with more women citing that than men. And that also increased across both genders with age. But again, I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record because we've done this a few times now, haven't we? But, in terms of meeting that member where they are, really understanding their motivation, their barriers. We also asked the question around, what's holding you back from taking out a membership for those that aren't currently members? Cost, value for money is always up there. Again, we saw a gender split of time with more women referencing that. And then we actually conducted some research that you may have seen at the tail end of last year, looking at lapsed members. So why are you, in a cost of living crisis, prepared to pay for a membership that you're physically not accessing, you're not benefiting from, or perhaps there is a benefit? And what we saw through that insight is, again, a very clear gender split of more women than men who were lapsed because they hoped that one day they would be motivated enough to return. Again, this sort of sits... Well, it depends on your moral compass. I know my personal view on this, and it will always come back to that onboarding. We need to understand members, understand what's going to prevent them, understand why they're there to really help this gender. Thanks.
How can clubs facilitate that? Like, how can they drive that level of data capture from their members?
Yeah, well, I think there's there's a few ways, actually. So one of the key things and one of the key messages from all the sessions you take today, you're going to be given a lot of insight, a lot of data, and Dave, you used it around actionable insight, is taking it back to our teams and saying, one of the studies we did recently looking at the difference between inactivity and activity, 67% of that cohort said that the difference between remaining inactive and becoming active is a warm welcome at their reception. So to your earlier point around brand values and and why people choose the clubs that they choose. If you are an operator here today and your aim is to create a sense of belonging, to create a community, to engage, to motivate, to excite, to encourage, then you need a team that's out there and they're going to talk to people. If they're not going to receive that. So again, it opens up that feedback channel, and there are a number of ways in which you can measure it as well. I could probably talk all day about this. I'll stop.
And I guess just to kind of say as an extension of that, it doesn't necessarily, certainly from the research that we've done, it doesn't need to be huge infrastructural changes either. It's like small things such as reviewing imagery, understanding your reporting process, little things like that can really influence and make a huge difference, and or just reminding people of what you offer. And I know that sounds potentially like, oh yeah, we do that all the time, but actually do you? And actually who do you do it to? Is it targeted? Is it not? And actually that's something very simple and implementable that organisations can do.
It's such a great point that actually I just want to add something. Shock. They're going to turn my mic off, aren't they? We deliver a lot of focus groups, so we have direct access to our consumers, those that are interested in membership, want to be active. We see consistently 8.5 out of 10 people want to be more active. But to your point around imagery and how crucial that is, we go and we present imagery that an operator is really excited about. Oh, this represents our brand and this is who we want it to be. And we go out and deliver these focus groups and people sit there and go, that's not me. I don't relate to that person. That's not a place for me. So it's that level of detail can have such an impact on the overall experience.
Thank you. Dave, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I feel quite underqualified for commenting on female participation in gyms, but I'll give it a go. No, I think it's echo George's first comment. Actually, it's really pleasing to see that we're having this conversation around kind of female participation. That's not to say there's not more work to be done. And the Ask for Angela campaign I think is really good because yes, we can get the imagery right, we can get the personalisation, the content right, but unless people feel that you are looking after them from overcoming that intimidation, that fear, like creating a culture where that feedback again is welcome and you're actually living and breathing that. I think that's really, really important. I mean, it's not, the question was framed around male participation kind of decreasing. I think it's worth mentioning that the industry is bigger than it's ever been, and it's largely due to the private and for the purpose of this room, independent operators growing. I think but the size of the market or the independent space or the private gym space has increased 32% over the last 10 years. So I think we've got male participation and that continues to grow, and it's just great to see that leveling out. I think we've got to credit things like, going back to my comment around Technogym Club's 4.0 model or the club within a club model or different spaces. I think it's largely driven by kind of the boutiques, creating that strength and kind of HIIT style training facilities, the group exercise environment. And I think the more we can continue to embrace that and revolutionise kind of the traditional gym floor, I think that's only ever going to continue.
Thank you. Okay, I'm moving on to the next slide. So I know this one is Julie's got a lot to say on this one. So early days matter, essentially. Almost 10% of all of the membership sales that we analysed terminated within 90 days of the start. 50%, over 50% were silent cancellations. I think we can safely say that those first 90 days are the danger zone. Losing 1 in 10 members within the first 3 months is going to hit hard, particularly when you look at acquisition costs versus retention costs. So Dave, I'll come to you first. I know Julie's spoken a lot about onboarding, but I think that it would be really good for you to actually just discuss how that onboarding journey can be automated and personalised to make sure that we're speaking to members as individuals.
I think to bring it back to kind of it's going to hit hard, it absolutely does. I mean, if you look at a couple of years ago now, but the recent Ursa study around cost of acquisition, they had it down at $66 or £52. So the reality is it's costing you if you're not onboarding them correctly and they're leaving within that first 90 days, or at least for the majority of facilities. I think, and I'm going to say this, but you've got to leverage technology, you've got to use the data, you've got to make sure that you use that data to then personalise the onboarding for each individual, hooking into the emotions, that why they joined in the first place, making sure that you're speaking in the language that they understand, and that's not a patronising comment, it's more like what's their demographic profile, how what generation do they belong to, how do they like to be communicated to, what channels and what messaging. And you can create that. I think we've spoken on many panels before, Julie, around the word induction. I want to see that abolished in the industry because it's just such an awful word. Like, we don't, nobody wants to be induced, right, Georgie?
Very timely.
So I think we need to create a personal welcome journey based on the motivations for joining, based on what they want to achieve, and then to your point earlier, Julie, around hooking back to that consistently throughout their journey. When we spoke about the Gen Z before, like, they expect personalization. So to get a generic email that's going to go to every single member or prospect, it's no longer going to cut the mustard. And again, when you have that data, use it to continually. It's not about reinventing the wheel. It's just about making it a little bit smoother every time.
Julie, I'm going to come to you now. Do you think it's an issue? There is an issue with expectation versus reality. Once a member joins, it's not quite what they imagined it to be. There are barriers. There are challenges.
That's a big question. Yeah, definitely. And we see that, quite often. I mean, again, for the operators in the room, do people cancel because they're relocating? Is that a reason we hear? Really, it translates as they're just being too polite to say, well, you haven't delivered on your promise, essentially. And we are seeing that gap. However, I'm often asked, well, Jules, what's the most successful operators doing? How are they managing this? What are they doing? And every successful operator that we get to work with and have conversations with are measuring each part of their customer experience. So again, if any of you in the room are using NPS, I mean, there's a number of metrics, but the Net Promoter Score, your detractors are key business intelligence. They're the ones that are telling you, well, hold on, I was expecting this, but this is the reality of my experience. So there is definitely gaps between expectation and delivery. There are so many facets to this in terms of making sure your teams are very clear on why you do what you do, how you want your members to feel when they walk through your doors, how you want them to feel when they leave, to move it away from being transactional. I was out working with the team yesterday and we did this brand exercise around 3 words. So if someone sees your brand, what do you want them to think? How do you want them to feel? And it was quite funny because we could say the 3 words for Premier Inn, we could say it for Apple, we could do it for Disney, but we got to their brand and it was a bit of a, Now, and if we're not clear, on how we want people to feel, then we're going to start to experience those gaps between delivery, expectation, etc.
Do you think that as a sector, we make it, going back to Dave's point earlier, we make it difficult for people to cancel, which then creates a negative experience, which then is going to prevent members from returning to that facility? Do you think we need to look at how we're managing cancellations as a sector, make it easy? I know it's going to be polarizing, but make it easy for people to cancel so there is no hard feeling and negative experiences. Because I know actually you've got an experiment to do, haven't you?
We are going to do an experiment. I know, it's pre-lunch. We need to move. So I'm going to do that in just a moment. But before we do, and please just humour me with it, and I know you feel, Dave, that we make it difficult. I think we make it incredibly easy. Now, again, I don't know all the operators in the room here, and perhaps you want to put a hand up or not, but I would imagine most of the process is email, fill out a form. How many of you work with your teams to really design that part of that member journey that you give? I believe if we gave that moment of cancellation the time we get the point of sale, think of all the time and the training we put into tours, how to deal with an inquiry, how to handle objections so that we can, convert all those leads into members. But do we train our teams to have an effective conversation around the moment someone wants to leave? How do we change the language? So it's not to cancel, you do this. It's, I'm really sorry to hear that you're looking to leave us, Dave. I'd really love to know, since you joined us, have you achieved your goals? Now, we were just talking about this, Sam, weren't we, in the other session, that arguably if you're enjoying your sessions, then you're intrinsically motivated. You never truly achieve your goals because why would you leave? You'll love it too much. You've put too much value on it. But if the absolute worst case scenario is somebody is going to leave you, then actually designing that moment to say, hey, do you know what? Well, thank you for being with us. We wish you all the best. And if you're ever back in the area, we'll welcome you back with open arms. And you get to finish that experience the way it started. Oh, it's given me goosebumps. I think it's quite nice, isn't it?
Sounds lovely.
It does sound lovely. So should we demonstrate this point?
Go on, Julie. I know you really want to.
I know, I've totally bigged this up now, haven't I? Right, I trust you all have pen, paper, phone, or a laptop, i.e. somewhere you can write something down in just a moment. Now, it's not that I don't trust any of you, but please put your devices down for the next 20 seconds, which is very specific for me, isn't it? And like I'm going to finish talking in 20 seconds. Okay, I'm going to stand up. This is serious. So, just making sure there's no cheating going on. Right, I'm going to read out a list of words to you, and all you have to do is listen to me. Okay? Good. Ready? Okay. Goggles, atlas, sun, book, apple, funny, lemon, radio, hotel, juice. So without conferring, please write down as many as you can remember. I know, pre-lunch, that's really mean, isn't it?
Need the countdown ticked off.
I know we do. All looking very serious. Okay, are we good? There'll be no judgment, I promise. She says. Okay, so the next step, I'm going to read out the list of words again. If you have the word, please stand up. Are we all okay to stand up? Just checking that. Okay. So if you have the word, you're up. If you don't have the word, you sit back down or you stay sat down. Okay? Good. Here we go. Goggles.
Wow.
Atlas. Sun. Sun. Book. Apple. Funny. Lemon. Sorry. Radio. Hotel. Juice. Okay, fantastic. Sit back down, guys. Okay, so what we've just walked through together is called the serial position effect, and it's how we perceive and recall memories, essentially, experiences. And what you guys actually demonstrated beautifully was a strong recall at the start. In the middle, it all got a bit messy, I'm not going to lie. But that's fine, because that's the point. And then towards the end, we had a strong presence standing. So for you to get the true recognition for the experience that you are looking to deliver, and you can take this principle and apply it in each and every scenario, but looking at your membership overall, the moment someone looks to leave is just as important as the moment they walk through their doors. So again, if that's an area of your customer journey that you think, yeah, but it probably is just a form, there's no conversation, it is just an email, then I would really encourage you to go back to your teams and really design that experience. You've got some great expertise in the room here today. Paul, I'll just give you a little shout out. We've got David here as well. Reach out to these guys who can help you design and deliver that. And thanks, you were amazing.
Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome.
Dave, we've talked a lot about delivering personalisation and personalised journeys to keep members engaged and retain them for longer. But I suppose as an independent gym owner with a limited resource, being able to facilitate that personalisation can probably feel quite overwhelming. What advice would you give to clubs, to gym owners, to help them implement that level of personalisation, particularly that Gen Z demands? I think it's like 73% that was surveyed expect personalisation.
It does seem overwhelming, I suppose, but it's much easier than you think. The systems and processes that you apply, it's kind of a one-time job because everything is automated on the back of that, really. And I think to Julie's point earlier, you can't afford not to invest some time in this early on. If you look at, we've already said 1 in 10 won't last 90 days, and then to anchor back to some earlier Les Mills research, we lose 50% of our membership base in a 12-month period and then you've got the cost of acquisition on top of that, and you can't afford not to do that because the generation coming through, the biggest ever generation for our industry over the next 5-10 years, is they expect that. We work with one club up in the north who have invested a little bit of time, a little bit of work. They've wanted to understand what every single touch point, which includes obviously the leaving journey, but also the first 90 days, and then whatever the duration is in between. And they've created 240 automated membership pathways that once a member falls into that, whether it be booking a first class or not turning up for a first class or whatever that might be, the systems just do it for you to then be able to spend the time as an operator in front of and conversing with, because ultimately we are a social industry, right? You don't want to spend too much time behind a desk while your members are on their own on the gym floor. Once you've set that journey up, you're then free to communicate with the people who are actually in the club and provide that experience, provide that value. I think it's really important. So it does seem overwhelming, it does seem daunting. The answers are already in your head if they're not in your systems already. So just spend a little bit of time kind of creating that, understand the triggers, and then automate that journey. I think it's great to sit here as well I think there's so much more data we can gather, and obviously you've got AI that kind of making a strong presence in our industry now, but trigger-based communication, push notifications, whatever it might be, is something that I think we should be doing it. And I reference this again at Elevate. If we look at adjacent industries, so we look at the retail industry, we look at the TV industry, we look at other industries that are not typically ours, it is the norm, it's standard, and it's what consumers expect. So we need to start kind of getting... I mean, the boutique sector do it quite well as well, I feel. So we've got the data, we're more data rich than we ever have been. Use it, that's kind of what you have to do.
I was just going to say, I guess, to emphasise some of that stuff, some of the top 5 reasons that we saw from the consumer engagement polling for ad cancelling and or ending their membership was not around, as you said, location or anything like that. Actually, it was around not using, loss of motivation, didn't have time. All of those 3 things actually are influenced. We can influence that through, some of the stuff that Dave was saying in terms of kind of capturing them, in terms of their point of interest, understanding what their point of interest and what their motivations are, to then really kind of encourage them back into ahead of cancelling and or re-engaging them or hooking them. I like that.
I think that's I think that's a really important point, actually, Georgie, because it's re-engaging or intervening prior to that significant drop in activity. So going back to Dave's point around the data, I think if operators can really harness the power of data that they have within their systems, track visit data, track activity, whether it's through, an app or, checking in, they will have insights into that and visibility into that activity level, and they will be able to intervene much earlier on in the process. I think our last year's research around attrition, I think it was 5 months between last visit and cancellation of a membership. So those 5 months are pivotal, and that's plenty of opportunity to actually go in and intervene in an effective way. The message here, I think, really is harness that data, use the data you've got within the system, just make use of it.